Hello, everybody, and welcome to the channel. Today we have a very special guest, Gabriel Miller, author of Death Song, the latest book in the Infinity Universe. Gabriel, it's lovely to have you.
Thanks, Dante. Thanks for having me.
So, Gabriel, you've just released this new book. It's come out September 23rd. It's available in ebook, and from what I hear, also an audiobook in the works as well.
Fingers crossed, man. Working in the audiobook world is like there are a lot of stakeholders in
Hmm.
this, and so everybody has to bless off on it. I've had some auditions from some absolutely phenomenal voice actors, and we're just working on, thankfully, all of them within the Infinity community so
Oh,
far,
really?
which is even better. It's a fan of a fan of
Hmm.
everybody in the family. Uh, just working on getting funding lined up and trying to make a final decision on who's doing it. But it is absolutely happening.
No, that's dope. You get to be involved in the process for picking the different narrators. Is it going to be one narrator or a bit of a cast?
Probably one, a fully voice acted novel, so multiple voices, multiple characters. We start getting exponentially more expensive. And as soon as you start getting into that world, then you
Hmm.
start working with larger companies who insist on profit sharing, and that
Ah,
is
sure.
something
Yeah.
I'm not authorized to share to give. I am
Ah,
the third party
okay.
contractor, so
Yeah,
I
right.
can't
Okay.
reach out
Hmm.
and give something that's not mine to give. So we're working on lining it up. It'll probably be a single voice actor,
Yeah,
and
it's dope.
hopefully one of the voice actors within the Infinity community that we have already spoken with.
Yeah, no, that'd be really cool. So I understand you're kind of an author before this whole kind of infinity thing cropped up with Death Song. Do you want to tell us a bit about your sort of journey as an author and how you came to infinity, both as a player and now as a creator?
Sure. Uh, I have been a storyteller my entire life in one way, shape, or form. I have been on stage. I have performed as a sword combatant at Ren fairs. I have been uh, a writer of short fictions that were available in magazines back in the early 2000s, if you remember physical print magazines before everything went digital. Uh, I have been writing and telling stories my entire life. And this journey with Death Song and working with Corvus Belli and Winged Hussar, the publisher, has been my first full length novel. Um, it's the first big piece that I'm out there going, oh God, don't judge me, but everyone please read this. Uh, it's been a wild journey. Uh, I have been playing Infinity, oh God, not that long, all told.
Hmm.
It had been just a few months, 6 months ish, from
Okay.
when this all started,
Hmm.
that I had been playing. I joined my local group. I got a demo from a good friend of mine and fell in love with werewolves and bears. And so, loved to send a bear screaming across the table and watch people cry. Uh, Back in N4, and then it was at Adepticon that I got to sit down next to the my editor and met him. We had a great conversation, and he told me to put my money where my mouth was, saying I think there should be more novels.
Hmm.
And it's kind of all she wrote at this point. Well, that's not all he wrote, but
Hmm.
that's the end of
Or
the
you either.
intro
Yeah.
story. Yeah, that was 2.5 years ago ish.
Oh,
It's
wow.
not been that
Hmm.
long, all told. Uh, and I'm already excited to be working on book number two.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's
Very
kind of a cool
cool.
journey.
No,
Yeah,
that's dope. So you've been a storyteller all your life. You've been writing kind of short fiction. You've now made this big jump into, as you said, your first kind of larger story. How do you kind of how do you feel your different areas of storytelling in your life have translated into this larger project? I can see kind of in the book, it kind of starts off as a number of almost vignettes that kind of twine into this kind of greater story as it goes. Do you think that was inspired kind of by your experience in short fiction?
it may very well have been. I'd love to give you an intellectual answer and say absolutely it was XYZ. We knew exactly what was happening. The first couple of drafts of the book, I kept getting feedback from my beta readers and from uh, my editor saying it doesn't feel like you're writing a novel. It feels
Mm.
like you're writing a screenplay. Because there would be these scenes that you would get in a film that don't make sense in a novel, but
Mm.
in a film, you're like, you will absolutely see the dude with the camera around the corner, but that'll be the only time you ever see him, and it's just a hint that something else is going on. But you don't get that sort of thing in novels in
Mm.
the same way. So I would absolutely say uh, coming back to your question, the working in shorter form or working in different mediums has definitely influenced my writing, at least in the beginning, and helped inform how I tell those stories in the long term.
Mm.
Now that you've asked that question, as I'm working on the outline for my next novel, I'm already thinking like, wait, am I doing this? Am I actually writing a group of vignettes? I need to go back and look at that and see how it actually goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, influences are a funny thing, and your experience is a funny thing, where you don't necessarily know how something's translated or necessarily connected till someone points it out, but it still kind of forms, part of your authorship, part of how you engage with that storytelling, part of how you write. And I will say, now that you mentioned
Absolutely.
kind of the cinematic kind of aspect to it, I think you can see that a lot, particularly in a lot of the action scenes. I think the action scenes are especially very cinematic, um, especially kind of the way that time very much slows down quite a bit in your action sequences, which I don't necessarily see in a lot of other books with action scenes. They're usually kind of very snappy, very quick. But it was very cool to see kind of a drawn out kind of experience of that action from the character's perspective. How else did you sort of shape how those action scenes played out with kind of reference to, I don't know, the cinematography of it, and then also linking in with Infinity as a game system?
Interesting question.
A lot of words, too many
From
words to say something from my end, maybe.
No, and anybody watching this, it is the middle of the night for Dante, and I just got up. It is the first thing in the morning, so
Prime
we're both
interview time.
struggling through
Yeah.
this. Yeah, perfect, flawless. Uh, I am prior military.
Mm.
Uh, I served in the United States Armed Forces years ago. Good lord.
Oh wow.
So there is some very clear influence, at least from my perspective, of how action actually happens,
Mm.
of how communication happens between soldiers and units, how you think and breathe and process through a firefight or something
Mm.
happening. Uh, but I think there is a moment. I'll use this as an example. There's a moment where one of the characters leaps off a building, cuts a remote in half with a sword, and then tumbles through a, a tchotchke shop.
Mm.
Uh, like tumbles into the window through an abandoned tchotchke shop, a little souvenir shop, and like that is a very quintessential action scene moment from
Yeah,
the movie.
absolutely. Yeah.
But it kind of leads back into we have this moment where everything's slow and he's processing what's happening, and then it feels like it all tumbles and catches up
Mm.
in the meantime. um I think I've dodged completely away from your question at this
No, no,
point.
that's
I'm
quite all
sorry.
right. So, with this kind of
uh
slowdown, is that something that's come, kind of that slowdown, then that tumble? Is that something kind of that's come from your experience in the military?
uh there, not to go too far into
Mm.
to war stories, but there is a moment that I recall having to uh jump out of the way of something and tumbling through just someone's possessions.
Wow.
Um, so there is a clear nod there to
Mm.
my own experience. But you did ask about Infinity of the Game
Mm.
influencing the action of the novel. There is a moment where one of the characters literally calculates his odds of success.
Yeah, that was very cool.
Uh, uh, he he's just sitting there like, okay, these two weapons I have, they're gonna do X, Y, Z. I have like this percent chance of actually succeeding, um, which is just a fun little nod to how the game actually flows on the tabletop. And those of
Mm.
us that have been playing for a while, I mean, myself only a couple of years, but everyone in my community has been around since N4 and 3, some of them even before that. So they're just rattling off these odds calculations in their heads. And so it was a fun nod to be able to give that to the story as well,
Mm.
and just have that little moment, that little tweak of wait, what are my odds to succeed here?
Yeah, no, that's really cool. No, I think we got kind of a very faithful adaptation of. I mean, there's a number of units, who very directly show up in the novel, who you might not realize, are that kind of units. Both by their
Mhm.
kind of nature as a unit, or just by the flow of the story as well. And I was kind of, as I was reading the novel, I'd slowly kind of be building a JSA or bond list as I was going of, oh, this is this character, and slowly add to the list. So we see a lot of, both the Japanese army, then also a fair bit of the Imperial service as well. Kind of when I guess we'll sort of go back to your, I guess the attraction of Infinity as a universe for you. So I know you're told to kind of put your money where your mouth is in terms of writing the novel, but what excited or what still excites you about being able to write a novel in the Infinity universe rather than another setting or a setting you kind of get to bake yourself? What's the attraction with the Infinity
Sure.
universe?
I've said a couple of times, for me personally, writing within an existing universe was a very empowering experience.
Mm,
Uh, it was very uplifting to not have to imagine and explain and create literally everything.
mm,
You can see the sun kind of coming up in the background and slowly lighting the
beautiful.
room around me. I'd love to say it's majestic, but I have the background up because my room is trashed, and I am in the middle of moving right now.
Oh wow, big
Um,
things.
just boxes over there. Um, I'm on Tangent Town today. My apologies.
That's okay. This is Tangent
Uh,
Town,
in
USA.
in my particular case, yes. in in the Infinity Universe, I didn't have to imagine everything.
Mm,
I didn't have to come up with who are these people? Why does this work? I didn't have to explain that we have a samurai in power armor,
mm,
right? That is just a thing that is in the Infinity Universe. So I didn't have to imagine it, explain it, create it, write it from scratch. I could just give a little bit of description of what was happening, and Infinity fans would understand,
mm,
and those that are not Infinity fans would at least understand what was happening around
mm.
them.
Yeah, that's a very kind of
The
delicate balance to hit between you're trying to write for this audience who is going to inherently understand a lot of things, and you don't want to necessarily bore them with, oh, this is a Damaru, this is a circular, but at the same time, you do have to
Mhm.
have that sort of inroad, which, partially is probably what CB wants to do with a book, is have an inroad into this universe that is very vast and complicated and hard to explain.
Very much so. Any novel, in my personal opinion,
Mm,
any novel that is set in an existing universe should be accessible
mm,
to anyone who has not played the game or existed within that universe. Uh, so that was something I tried very, very hard to do from the beginning, is explain the Infinity Universe in a way that makes sense both to those who have existed within that world
mm.
and played within that game, and to people who have not.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. What would
there,
you?
you mentioned the
Mm,
circular.
yeah.
There's a scene where a character is on a circular, and she gives this brief description of what a circular is.
Mm,
And there's moments in this book where you have a tiny bit of exposition to explain what a thing is, because a space train that jumps through wormholes is a little too simplistic of a sentence to throw out there versus a bit of explanation as far
Mm,
as what a circular actually is. This intergalactic, or yeah, intergalactic transportation between these different systems. Um, there are little moments like that that kind of have to happen
yeah.
in any
Mm,
franchise, whether it be Infinity or another, but they can happen in colorful and flavorful ways
mm.
to help inform the book, both for people who live within that world, those of us that play the game, and those who are just approaching it for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, within people who play the game as well, there's always going to be varying levels of understanding or knowledge within those groups as well. So, I think it's great it's there both for the new people, and for the people who just might be having that burgeoning interest. But, I mean, Infinity is such a great universe, very expansive universe as well. What do you think was your greatest challenge in working within the universe, and how did you overcome it?
Ooh. Oh, that's a tough question, man. Uh, there were a lot of challenges
I mean,
working within the
anyone that sticks
universe.
out to you is fine as well. If there's one that kind of jumps to mind.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing, and this goes back to working within an existing universe
Mm.
and imagining everything from scratch. There was originally a shuttle that I introduced, like an armored heavy assault. The Invincible Army would use it, kind of heavy
Ah,
assault
yeah,
shuttle,
cool.
and I wound up naming it and giving it a little bit of, there's a character who goes, "Oh, I know what that is because I've been on one before,"
Mm.
uh, and giving it a name and having an existing character identify with having been on one before
Mm.
means that now I need to go back to CB and
Ah, yeah.
verify and
Mm.
double check and make sure that that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because working within that existing universe, I have to honor the past, honor what's already been written,
Mm.
uh,
Mm.
whether it be a public document or sometimes a private document. There are things that Gutier, the lore master, has worked on that are not in publicly available materials,
Mm.
either yet or at all.
Mm.
Uh, because as a writer and a world builder, he has spent hours and hours and hours dreaming all of this up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when I kind of invented, big air quotes, the Taifang, which was what the name that I gave to the shuttle, just by giving it a name, I then have to go back and ask questions.
Mm.
And so you'll find in the final copy of the final edit, the official novel, that the name isn't in there
Yeah. Yeah.
because just by adding a name, it creates a complication
Mm.
in that narrative backstory that
Yeah, absolutely.
over the course of a 100,000 word novel, 106 and change. Um, Over the course of that, we've got all this room and all this breadth to write and explain and understand, but there are some fights that are not worth fighting
Mm.
in that
Yeah.
context. And I would
Mm.
say that was the biggest struggle for me is I have so much freedom and so much creative uh, room
Mm.
within the storytelling, but then there are moments where I need to go back and double check something just to make
Yeah, sure.
sure,
Yeah.
or this detail that I imagined, is that detail important enough? Like the assault shuttle, for
Mm.
instance, is that detail important enough that we need to go through all of the verification process and then make sure it aligns? And if it doesn't align, how do we change it? Is it important enough to go through all of that, or does all of that detract from the story in the long run? And
Yeah.
is it
Mm.
is that a fight worth fighting?
Mm.
Um, so the details for Infinity, one of the most amazing things about the Infinity Universe to me is how detailed and in depth everything is. Everything from
Mm.
the Toha Triumvirate to the Combined Army and Dawn and Ariadne and that history. All of it is so rich and so detailed that you want to make sure you're being faithful to that,
Mm.
even as you pave new roads
Yeah,
and
yeah.
uh, write new stories along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think, whenever a player asks, oh, what to do with the combined army, it's sort of like, oh, damn, I mean, how much time you got? Because, if,
Yeah,
yeah, you know, and,
yeah,
obviously some factions have more complicated history than others. But, it's a
very much
game
so.
where, you know, if, yeah, someone asks about a Unidron, there's a load of stuff behind that. But from what it sounds like you're saying to me is you sort of had a lot of control, sort of big picture, kind of looking at the larger narrative. But when it really got down to the details, that's where you'd have to sort of be kind of having to be able to check and stuff like that. And you kind of drew a clear line of established and not established. So what was it like, having the character of Takeshi, who, even though he's not necessarily a character who's had a lot of, who's been fleshed out before, essentially, he's still, a character that pre-exists compared to someone like Mizu, who, even though they're, a unit, they reflect a unit in the game, they're not a named character in that sense. What was the
Mhm.
difference in being able to handle those characters?
There was a huge difference between Takeshi and Mizu. Takeshi, all of the descriptions we've gotten of him, we have received
Mm,
of him, are the noble, quiet, stoic samurai character who just always lands on his feet and always survives these impossible situations. But that doesn't tell us, excuse me, that doesn't tell us who he really is.
mm,
So we
mm,
know he's a noble character, but in any sort of court setting, there's tiers to nobility.
mm.
Is he does his family call up the emperor and say, "Hey Bob, what's up?"
Yeah, yeah.
Or are they so far down the line that they wouldn't even dream of looking at the emperor even though they're noble?
Mm,
So having to and those were conversations that I was able to get connected with Gutierrez near the end, details out.
oh wow, cool.
Where Takeshi was introduced as a sergeant when he was first introduced, but
Mm,
now here we are narratively 7, I think, years later. Is he still a sergeant or has he been promoted? What is his current rank? What there's a character in it who was originally his uncle who
mm,
narratively doesn't make sense to be his uncle anymore based off of where he actually is within nobility hierarchy. So there's
mm,
all of these little details that had to be pursued, had to be very clear, and needed to make sure that they aligned with where the story already is. And there was a big
mm.
request for stories about the named characters from the
Yeah,
game,
yeah.
not
Mm,
because we want to know who these people are.
mm,
With Mizu, there was just a blender of creative freedom and ideas. I could take all of these different ideas I had and throw them into a blender and see what came out. And I wrote Mizu 6 or 7 times before I really figured out who she is. And a little kind of peek behind the creative curtain, I started all of these different characters with writing their first scene. Like, what is their first scene? Who are they? So for Mizu, it's the very first chapter of the book. It's her on a dock. So I wrote that scene to really figure out who she was, and then I went back and rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it until I really had a good idea of who Mizu actually is. There is a direct corollary in the game. She is an Aragoto killer hacker. That is the thing that she is mechanically in the game. But she as a character is so much more than that. And writing for her, I had a lot more creative uh, depth with which to just decide what she was, who she is as a person, what are her fears, her dreams, etc. Versus Takeshi, I still decided all of those things, but I had to go back and double check to make sure the little details, like I mentioned, the attack shuttle, his rank, where his family is in nobility and that hierarchy, all of these little details had to be answered as well. So they're the same on a creative balance side, but then you don't have to answer a lot of the same questions for Mizu that I did for Takeshi. And
Mm.
so it was a really interesting uh, process to be able to just say, this is who she is. This is what are her hopes and dreams and fears, and what drives her and motivates her, and what are her
Mm.
flaws, and what brought her to this moment in time. Versus Takeshi, where there were some very intentional, okay, I need to double check to make sure this aligns.
Mm. Mm. I've got two follow-up questions from that, but I might just start with the first one,
Go for it.
which is more sort of on your, I guess, writing and development. I think every writer who I've heard an interview with uh, has always had kind of the way they kind of craft their story and the way they develop their characters. How do you kind of go about developing those characters? Is it you sort of have the narrative and you try to sort of stick them along the narrative path and figure out what's the most likely way this happens? Or is it more that you have the character and you think, what would the character do? How do you sort of, what's the balance between character and overall story? And how do you develop your characters to meet, I guess, each interest of the book?
Yeah, interesting. You're on a roll, man. These are interesting questions. Uh, for Death Song specifically,
Hmm.
I knew who the characters were before I knew what the story was.
Oh, okay.
Uh, and actually, come to think of it, I'm doing the same thing for the next book too.
Hmm.
Um, I To me, the characters are what drive the story. They are the interesting piece. Everything that happens around them is more set dressing for the journey that the character goes on.
Hmm.
And so for for Death Song, I started it with Mizu. Mizu was
Oh,
the first
okay.
character
Hmm.
that I imagined. Um, Actually, that's a lie. I'm sorry. I started it with Bianca.
Oh, really? That's
Uh,
cool.
in Yeah,
And
in
Bianca's
the
the
Uprising
war
book.
core character in the story, right?
Yeah, and she's not just in this story. Bianca is actually a character creation of Gutierre.
Oh, okay.
She has appeared in, I think, don't quote me on this one, but I'm pretty sure she has appeared in every campaign book or every lore book that
Oh,
has come
wow.
out.
I had no idea.
She is one of the characters who gives us a vignette
Hmm.
into. She is a lens to see the world of infinity.
Hmm.
In the Uprising lore book that we got, she was on Mars. She was on the run from an Imperial agent who was trying to kill her because she had this scoop that kind of lit the public spark of the
Hmm.
uprising. There were machinations, there were backroom things, all of that was already happening, but her story of Yu Ching Command just blatantly disrespecting soldiers of the Japanese army that they were sending to die,
Hmm.
that story really kind of lit the spark of the revolution as far as the public context is concerned. Tale, and she's actually saved by Jaspier, the assassin, in that tale in the Uprising book,
Oh,
and
wow.
and
Okay.
that is what started Death Song. That that
Hmm.
little story was what started the inspiration for Death Song, even before I knew that it was the novel that I was going to be writing. Because in the back of
Hmm.
my head, I'm already asking more questions. I'm already trying to figure out. It's the improv and acting exercise. Yes, and I'm trying to figure out what's next.
Hmm.
So Death Song really started with Bianca, and then
Hmm.
the next thing I imagined was Mizu. Who is she? What she got? She is an Aragoto who is on, essentially, from her perspective, she is in occupied enemy territory. and she
Mm.
got left behind during the uprising. So who is she? What drives her? What motivates her? And then Takeshi came along and joined the story in my head, and then the other characters kind of filled in after that. But it really was a story that developed from figuring out what the character journey was first, rather than figuring out what the story was and then creating characters to fit it. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, I think so.
I think I've done this in
Yeah,
every interview.
absolutely.
I'm like, oh yeah, and all of this other stuff. Wait, did I answer the question?
No, nothing wrong with that. And so my second one is, and you sort of linked in with this, where you've got this, you had the seed of your idea with the kind of uprising book. You've got Bianca, you've got Yes Beer, but where did you then go from that kind of seed of an idea to kind of envisioning the greater narrative, or going to CB and saying, "This is the story I want to write"? What was that process like?
Um, are you familiar with the program Miro? It is a digital whiteboard. It's like a giant whiteboard that you can post pictures and draw lines, and I created a Miro board, which if you've seen the meme of a dude pointing at a board with all of these pieces of paper and red spider webs coming out of it of yarn, it looked like a conspiracy theorist's board. It really
Mm.
did.
Yeah, yeah.
Did. And and so as I was coming up with this story, I made that, and then I sent it to my editor,
Mm.
Brandon.
Mm.
And kind of the I'll come back to that. So I sent it to Brandon, and then he said, "This is beautiful. Okay, now put it in a Word document for me."
Yeah, right.
And so then I wrote it into a coherent outline.
Mm.
And kind of the way that process works, to come back to that random thought that popped into my head, Corvus Belli is the conductor.
Mm.
It is their IP, it is their world, it is their universe that I am blessed enough to be able to write within. But Winged Hussar is the publisher, and that is
Mm.
a imprint of Simon and Schuster, owned by Vince and Brandon Rossbond, and they are just phenomenal humans. And so what they have done is license the novel rights from Corvus Belli.
Okay.
So kind of the way the process works is I come up with a story idea, and I work it a little bit. I happen to be blessed enough to be friends with the marketing director of Corvus Belli as well, so
Mm.
we chat a lot. And I'll work on an outline, and then I'll go to my editor
Mhm.
and I say, "Hey, Brandon, what do we think?" And we'll work on it a little bit, and then we'll send it to Corvus Belli for a blessing.
Mm.
And once we get that, we're off to the races.
Mhm.
But until then, I can write anything in the world I want. But if it's not what Corvus Belli wants to see next, or wants to see at all, then I might have to shift gears and go a
Okay.
different direction.
Mm.
With Death Song, it was actually uh, one of three of my original pitches
Oh,
of
okay.
the novel,
Mm.
of my first novel to write,
Mm.
and it was the direction that we decided was the best direction to pursue
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
those.
And do you know?
But
And if you can't say anything, that's fine. Do you know the factors they were thinking about when looking at those three pitches? What do you know what they
sure,
were thinking about between those pitches?
this part was with me and the publisher, with
Ah,
Brandon, my
okay.
editor.
Mm.
Uh, we had just come off. By Fire and Sword was about to come out, the next Pano book, or the
Mm.
most recent Pano book that came out, and the most recent novel before that was Eric Art.
Mm.
And both of my other pitches were Ariadnen.
Ah,
So
yeah. Okay.
it was a pretty easy distinction to
Mm.
make. Of We just wrote an Ariadne novel, we just wrote this Caledonia novel, and so one of my pitches centered around Usha McNeil, and
Ah,
so we
okay.
said, okay, we're not gonna do that yet.
Mm.
And then I had another pitch about uh, a Van Zant, a USARF character,
Oh yeah, no, yeah,
uh,
Vincent, yeah,
and and we kind of put a pin in that. Maybe we'll come back to that one day.
yeah, that's cool.
But the third pitch for the third of the three death songs
Mm-hmm.
was just an immediate yes.
Mm,
That's what it is.
mm.
And so we put that together and we sent that over to Corvus Belli, and I just went ahead and started writing immediately because I was inspired, I was motivated, I was driven, and I just kind of jumped straight into it. And
Mm.
eventually they said, "Yeah, okay, that's cool, let's do it." Um, and then I was fortunate enough to get brand new art and the launch of the Corvus Archives, which is kind of the brand name we're rolling all of these novels into.
Oh, sort of like the Corvus
Um,
Belli, like Black Library sort of thing.
uh, in a thematic way,
Mm,
absolutely.
mm.
We won't be, at least for the near future, we won't be physically printing our own
Yeah,
novels,
yeah. Mm,
but we're from a brand recognition
mm.
perspective, we needed something unifying because we
Yeah,
didn't really have
yeah.
one yet.
Mm. No, no, that makes a lot of sense. My next question, you covered it a little bit, but I was going to ask you sort of what other characters, factions, and other sort of stories in the Infinity Universe appeal to you. It sounds like you've got a pretty strong connection to the Ariadnans, both from what you've told me about your other pitches and also where you started the game from as well. Do you want to tell me a bit about where your kind of love of Ariadne comes from and some other characters, factions you're interested in exploring?
Sure. Um, my love of Ariadna comes from my love of werewolves.
Yeah.
uh, Being in the military prior and um, also being a really big fan of the werewolf genre
Mm,
kind of looped me into Ariadna pretty quickly. Um, and then I shout out to Warlore, who created a beautiful Ariadna lore series that he put
yeah.
out years
Mm,
ago. That those really hooked me and drug me into it.
yeah, they're great
There's a
videos.
bunch of Ariadna stories that are rattling around in my head. Various characters, both existing
Mm,
and individual, and maybe I'll get to come to those in the future. Who
yeah.
knows?
No, that's very
But
cool.
another character who's always interested me is Perseus.
Mm,
Uh, the idea of this rogue Myrmidon who got basically he came back after being behind enemy lines. He came back after being imprisoned and just got to look down the guns of his friends.
mm,
Like that is what does that do to a person?
yeah, yeah.
What does that do to someone who was literally created to serve a purpose and
Mm,
then suddenly that purpose can no longer be fulfilled uh, from any sense of what he understood it was.
mm,
There's a line, I don't know where it originated, but you'll find it on Human Sphere. It
mhm.
was probably one of the campaign books, where he says, Andromeda, yeah, I know her. She's tried to kill me more than once. That, so here's this Myrmidon character, created by Aleph, didn't have a family other than Aleph,
Mm,
who was cast aside, and now he's working predominantly with the nomads.
mm.
Who is he? What sort of stories does he have to tell? Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
there's also very much so. There is also Cornac interests
Oh
me
yeah, yeah,
here
absolutely.
lately. Who is he? How did he rise to the ranks that he is at?
Mm,
There, we get a little bit of a glimpse, and I can thank Mark Barber for this one, the author of Downfall and By Fire and Sword. We get a little bit of glimpse into Morat culture
mm,
in By Fire and Sword, and so we reading that really made me interested in who Cornac is because the we think, at least my local
mm.
meta has a joke. It's monkey go burr, and that is how you play Morats.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
just
Yeah.
monkey go burr, monkey punch.
Mm,
But in By Fire and Sword, we got this beautiful glimpse of this rich intellectual culture that looks at war as way more than just a meaning or a purpose,
mm.
but looks at war as an art form in its own way. So Cornac has been kind of rattling around in my brain a little bit here the last couple of weeks. Um, Man, there's just so many cool characters in Infinity.
Yeah,
It is
absolutely.
hard to pick just one.
And I think it's as we sort of discussed earlier, there's a lot of opportunity in these characters where you kind of get just enough of a kernel of kind of a thematic core to the character or an interesting aspect to them that kind of jogs the imagination, but they're not characters that don't have any room to be explored, for example. You kind of get that. It's kind of like
Absolutely.
popcorn. You've got all those little kernels, and you've got a unique opportunity to go in and pop one of those open. Uh, which I think it's a very cool position to
Man,
be
that's
in.
a fun analogy. That's a fun analogy. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, I think we might have to kind of put a line in the sand here and kind of go into spoiler territory. So I think to anyone watching now,
Beautiful.
um, if hopefully we've captured your imagination, go give Death Song a read. It's very much worth doing. And please come back afterwards. But for anyone who's read the novel
Absolutely.
or who doesn't want to get spoiled, this may be your time to hop off the circular. And I think we'll start diving into the meat and potatoes of Death Song. So for you,
Let's do it.
what's the thematic core at the center of Death Song?
Oh man, I went through a bunch of ideas on how to answer this question. I've
Mm.
been asked this by a couple of people now. Also my editor, and I'm like, I don't know, man. It's a book. It's a story.
Mm.
I think the big themes for me for Death Song is coming home.
Mm.
Um, when they travel back to Shentang and the island of Kurimori, uh, there's this covert mission that the team is a part of, and Oyama is literally going to his childhood home.
Mm.
Like that is where the mission goes.
Mm.
And so he's processing all of this grief and a estranged relationship with his father and dealing also with his own legend.
Mm.
He is, the nickname Neko, the growing legend that he has become. That's got to weigh on you. That's got to weigh on people. And so
Mm.
there's he's going through this going home thing, and also going through this. I need to evolve into the next stage and process my survivor's guilt with
Mm.
everything that he's been going through. One of the very early lines from him that I loved writing was, "I don't think." Oh, I'm going to get the quote wrong now. Of course, I am my own book. I don't think my survival is something to be lauded.
Mm.
Uh, and in context, he's referring to the deaths of all of his teammates, adding to his legend,
Mm.
and that is something that he really, really struggles with.
Yeah, it's a very
And
interesting
then
perspective, sort of with the he only survivor of his squad. It's kind of like the Unknown Ranger as well, where it's like, oh, his whole squad was wiped out. He's the only survivor, and as you say, he's kind of lauded for that being a survivor. But then you've got that intense guilt that comes with that, as you mentioned, uh, and also sort of, it seems like he sort of feels like his death is very much kind of on his heels at all times, or
mhm.
that he's sort of which I imagine kind of links into that survivor's guilt, where he sort of feels in the shadow of death for most of the novel.
I am really glad to hear that came through.
Mm.
Uh, I'm really, really glad to hear that came through. Thanks, man.
Yeah, I mean, he comes through as very mournful, not only reflecting on his past, but also in sort of trying to realize his future. He sort of
Mhm.
very much feels like kind of, you know, they always say there's kind of these parallels between kind of the samurai and the Western genre. He very much feels like a dead man walking sort of archetype from a Western. It was kind of like you know, like the lone gunslinger, or like the kind of
Mm.
retired Clint Eastwood character who's getting pulled in sort of for one last big job. But for him, it's not one last big job. It's these things. It's kind of like he keeps getting put on these one last big jobs in his own mind, and sort of
Yeah, absolutely.
the character of oh, I'm gonna get this very wrong, Nakama,
Nakama.
Nakama,
Yeah.
fantastic. I only realized when I started this interview of, oh, you know, I've read these names, but I've never had to say these
I should
out
probably
loud.
figure out how to pronounce them.
Yeah, yeah.
If they are any of the Japanese characters, one of the wonderful things about the Japanese language is that it's very phonetic.
Mm, mm,
So it sounds like it looks.
mm.
Uh, whereas with Chinese, especially, you could put the emphasis on a different syllable, and suddenly it's a completely different word, and it sounds
Yeah,
completely
yeah.
different. Thankfully, Japanese is a little more phonetically aligned. So
Mm,
uh, Nakama is nakama.
yeah.
Nakama.
No, that's very nice. Yeah, Nakama, and kind of his interaction of almost kind of a reflection of, I guess, you know, one of Takeshi's potential futures, in a sense, and kind of as a he's a very strange mentor character. You know, you used to kind of like the Ben Kenobi, who's very much kind of on hand the whole way, or
Hmm.
for a significant amount of time. But it feels very interesting as kind of more of these chance encounters that inspire reflection in Takeshi rather than a guiding hand. How did you sort of come to that as a dynamic between the characters compared to maybe more of a traditional mentor relationship, or how did you envision their relationship?
Completely accidentally. If I'm being honest with you, uh, Nakama was an important introduction to the story for his own mission
Mm,
and why he goes along. Uh, but that first interaction with Takeshi in the garden or in the shrine
mm,
at the beginning of the novel really set the tone for the rest of their relationship.
mm,
And he's there at his Takeshi is there at his mentor's bidding, at his swordmaster's bidding to meet this person, and everyone else already knows what's about to happen, and Takeshi doesn't, and
mm,
he's not even in the loop as far as what's going on, and that interaction, much like the creation of Mizu, that interaction I wrote 3 or 4 times
mm.
until it worked. And the final result is what you see now. And that passage actually didn't get changed much
Oh, okay.
in the editing
Mm,
process. Uh, that relationship, like I said, it really set the tone for who, or that interaction, excuse me, set the tone for what that relationship would be. And they don't
mm.
meet a lot.
No. Yeah.
They, in fact, meet very little throughout the story,
Mm.
but the impact that it leaves on Takeshi is, I think, pretty profound each time,
Yeah, absolutely.
especially
Yeah.
especially in the end.
I mean, he seems to sort of kick off, you know, a big change in Takeshi, or at least spurs kind of a very deep reflection, to then sort of be able to kind of give a nudge kind of towards the end, and then of course kind of, you know, be able to kind of meet Takeshi again, kind of, uh, you know, in the present moment, kind of as he's gone through his, you know, hero's journey, I suppose, or
Yeah,
for somebody who doesn't
and
feel like a
and
hero
when
is
they
very interesting. Yeah.
meet at the end, Takeshi is at his lowest point.
Mm, mm.
Like he is, and we are firmly in spoiler
Yeah,
territory.
yeah.
So
Mm,
anybody watching this is absolutely a spoiler. As he's staring at his dead father's body
mm,
that he has discovered, and now he knows why he never got to say goodbye to his
Mm.
dad, and he's and in his this estranged, difficult, distant relationship that is alluded to, he finds a death poem in his father's, quantronic halo, his digital halo, and it just crushes him.
Mm.
Uh, and then Nakama shows up and kind of gives a hero of the moment position where he brings the detox and the med kit that they all need, and says, "Tears are the eyes' way of speaking when the heart no longer can."
Mm. Mm.
And it's this rich, beautiful moment of those two characters that I was just so very, very happy to get right. That was
Yeah.
one that
Mm.
we slaughtered in edits. We wrote and rewrote and tweaked and tried, and I really, really hope folks enjoy that part, because that
Yeah.
was a culmination of a lot of work.
No, it'd be scary drafting what you know is the crux of one of the narratives in the story, and just being, kind of like you said at the start of the interview, please read it, but also I'm very scared in a sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it the analogy I've given many times now is that here's this thing I'm really proud of. Check it out, but oh God, don't look at my art. That don't look at my drawings. This is,
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed.
No, I mean, I think
It's a
any,
weird
yeah, I think
weird line to walk.
any artist ever can, sympathize with that feeling, whether you're doing, literature or music or graphic, well, graphics the wrong word, visual arts. I think that's something
Yeah.
any artist can kind of connect to and sympathize with that feeling. Uh, so I mean, yeah, I mean, great to push through it, and I think you've, delivered something very special. But I think, I have to be brutally honest with you. I think my favorite characters or group of characters is really Mizu and her biker gang. I think for me they're
Me too.
really, yeah.
Yeah,
I think,
my wife
yeah.
is reading the book now
Uh-huh.
in full. She read little snippets here and
Mm,
there. She was a great sounding board for
mm.
people. Someone who knows nothing about Infinity. Can she follow? Is she
Oh,
understanding what's
that's a
happening?
great resource to have.
Um, I was very fortunate, and she's also a absolute uh, literary addict. She reads constantly, so
Mm.
now she's reading the book, and she said Takeshi's my favorite character so far, and I went, "Damn it!" um, uh, Mizu and the third hand, which is her gang.
Mm,
Um, oh, their story was the most joyful and organic part of writing the whole thing.
mm, mm.
Uh, I absolutely love her character, and I wanted her. I kept writing more scenes for her, and Brandon, the editor, kept coming back and saying, "Hey, what about the samurai on the cover? Like, we need to go back and write more about
Yeah, what about
him."
that Takeshi guy, huh? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, what about him?
No, I mean, I think I can empathize you there because I think, Takeshi, he has a story, a very good story, but a story that, can be hard to relate to in some ways. A lot of people won't experience, the very deep and very, you know, terrifying experiences Takeshi's had and where that's left him and his relationship with death. And even though you also see a relationship with death coming from the biker gang, the way that manifests kind of in their emotions and relationships is, I think, something, the average person is going to be able to uh, sort of connect with more than potentially Takeshi. I think whether it's sort of, kind of fear or kind of a poisoned nostalgia, or a lot of the other things, a lot of that biker gang struggles with. I think I think potentially it's a lot easier to connect with those for the average reader, uh, where kind of the gang has
They're
a rich tapestry of themes between and within them.
very much so, and you see four of them predominantly,
Mm,
but there's the rest of them. There's Fox and Chen and the rest of the team that shows up in a little vignette in the middle as well as in the beginning,
Mm,
and like they show you, in my mind, and the intention behind it was they show you the very human side.
mm,
And you do have Takeshi, who's this. I don't know what it's like to be in the Imperial Court. I don't know what it's like to be, at a dojo training with a master. I
mm,
I don't have that context. But as a normal human, I can very much relate to Mizu and her
mm,
fear and her anxiety and her addiction
mm,
and uh, how she struggles with all of it throughout the whole story. And we all have a Goro in our lives, the friend who is the emotional support shoulder and
mm.
will absolutely murder anyone who looks at us wrong. We all have John, we have a Naismith, we have somebody who's going
Mm,
to keep us in check. We all have a Kari who is the spirit and the livelihood and the optimism
mm,
of our social circle. And it felt very human to write them and to explore their story.
mm. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I think that the most shocking bit of the whole book for me, really, you've got these kind of great action scenes, these kind of big fights, these triumphs, these grand reveals. But the thing that really shocked me about the book was John's betrayal. That was the point. Like that was like when I think of the book, like that's what sticks out in my mind as the biggest plot element for me was the journey of that gang and then John's betrayal. And it's still, yeah, I mean, it's, oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of struggling of things to say because it was, I don't know. I mean, did you have that in mind with John from the start? Did that kind of direction develop as you wrote him?
Yeah.
What was your journey with
uh,
writing John?
John is what I call the honest turncoat.
Mm,
um, John, it and what once it happens, right at the end when it happens, and he flips, and suddenly the gang realizes that he flips. Then all of these previous sequences
mm,
where he'll make a comment, or there'll be a scene where Mizu talks about his connections or how they've stayed out of trouble.
mm,
Uh, that all of these previous moments, you realize that, oh my God, that's what all that meant.
mm,
And you realize with John's betrayal that, like, he he just wanted to protect his friends.
mm, mm,
He just wanted to keep them safe, and he was doing it in the way that he understood he could do it, because it's not really written in the novel, but there's this. As I imagined him, I just tried to imagine how powerless he must feel,
mm,
and what could he do? What way could he create agency in his own fate and
mm,
protect his family?
yeah,
Because their goals were the same,
mm,
but their their direction and how they handled it were very, very different.
yeah. I mean, I think when we talk about kind of universal themes that people could connect to, I think the powerlessness of the gang, is something that people can connect to as a thematic thread. I mean, they're under you know coercion and kind of entrapment on several levels. They've got the state empire, who they're under in allied territory. They've got the yakuza, who represents sort of a local oppression, and then also especially I think Takeshi's kind of spells it out as well, kind of a fall from grace from a well-regarded military unit to now being kind of pawns of the yakuza. They've gone from being kind of having the bravado of that kind of military, I don't know, I suppose lineage behind them, to now essentially being gangsters. And that's something that comes across very heavily as well, is them kind of missing also their own culture within kind of that biking community. And then on the personal level, with Mizu's addiction as well, I think you're sort of seeing this oppression of the self throughout kind of every level that this biker gang is involved in their kind of surrounding in society. And I think anyone can relate to feeling trapped on one of those levels.
Absolutely. And we all have lived a moment where we feel like we have no agency.
Mm,
And you know, they got left behind. They The only way they could survive was to fall in with the Yakuza, who we find out are in the exact same boat they are.
mm,
They're just trying to survive on this island. And then the Sparrow shows up and says, "By the way, you're co-opted into this mission. Let's roll."
mm,
And they don't really ever get a say in their own fate.
mm,
But even with that, Mizu still just blindly leaps, and John struggles not to leap.
mm,
And it's this continuing tension of Mizu throwing herself into the hurricane and just getting wrapped up in it. As on one level, it may even be a self-destructive tendency,
mm,
whereas John is trying to protect everybody, but by staying out of the storm.
mm.
And it's this push and pull for them with how do they have agency, but how are they still powerless at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's one kind of interesting concept you have in the story, which is the shake, and it's something we see kind of an aspect of Mizu that sort of, and you can tell me if I'm totally off base here. It reads to
Of
me as
course.
essentially sort of the burnt off, kind of the years of burnt off adrenaline, in a sense. Kind of, I used to skateboard a lot, and there'd kind of be a moment when you were going very fast, or where you were doing a thing, where you'd sort of get this massive hit of adrenaline that would tell you to stop, and then you'd have the moments where you would realize, oh, it's okay, I've landed this, and kind of the nirvana that followed from that. I kind of read the Sheikah as Mizu has lost that nirvana state that's come after the, oh, this is okay, and now just has that adrenaline of fear, but also that need to kind of bring it to that completion. And I think the way I read the story is we get to see the Sheikh from Mizu's perspective, but it's very clear, the gang has a language among themselves of the Sheikh. They all have an understanding of the Sheikh, and I think John very much had the Sheikh as well, but the way he, as you said, his kind of completion to Nirvana was more in staying out of the hurricane and kind of letting go into essentially into the agency of the Imperial Service, where Mizu's kind of Nirvana state was kind of keeping that trajectory and going forward. That's sort of how I
There,
interpret it.
I think that's a great analogy, man. When my editor asked me what is the shake, he was trying to understand it after reading through it the first time, uh, trying to understand my perspective of
Mm,
it. I described it as the gut wrenching addiction to adrenaline
mm,
and the need for more.
mm,
Um, and it very much falls back on what you're saying. Like there is no completion, so you have to keep seeking it.
mm,
Um, and there's a in the army, I used to call it a rattle, right? It's no matter how calm and cool and collected you are, there's always a moment inside where when you're heading on a mission or you're heading out on an operation that there's a high likelihood of engagement.
mm,
There's a rattle inside you, and outwardly you can be completely calm, but that rattle is still there. It's still like your stomach clenches, your chest tightens. It's an anxiety of
mm,
anticipation.
mm,
And with the shake, I wanted to try to portray that like that anxiety doesn't ever go away.
mm,
And so Mizu handled it with drugs,
mm,
and we we don't really delve into that in the novel because that is established as something that's in her past.
mm,
But then she watches Takeshi deal with it in his own way, uh, and that was a really fun analogy. I love your analogy with the skateboarding because it's the same thing. It's that adrenaline. It's the post adrenaline euphoria and
mm,
seeking that. That is a fantastic analogy.
Mm. And I think the language of the shake, I think it's a good term as well, because, if I have a slightly different idea of the shake from what yours was, it was still something where I could connect with the novel and connect with the shake. I think, sort of like we said, with, a feeling of a lack of agency, everyone's going to have felt something that they can describe as, the shake in their own life, that they can connect with how the gang's feeling and how they're acting. So I think it's another point where you can really connect with the biker gang that really sort of endeared them to me as a group of characters.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I very much felt my heart and soul connect to them pretty immediately when I started writing them.
Mm, mm. No, that's fair enough. I think, sort of, before we kind of go into what's next for you, tell me a little bit about sort of the role the Imperial Service plays in the story, because they pretty obviously play into that theme of agency uh, in sort of their organizational structure. But when did the Imperial Service enter the picture, and what were the different ways you used them in the narrative?
Oh man. Um, they're they're there for a couple of reasons. One, you need a bad guy,
Mm,
right? A pretty easy translation there. You need an enemy of some sort
mm,
in a story. You need an opposing force, an antagonist. Um, the Imperial Service is the obvious choice for that from the Uprising campaign book we
mm,
got. In that book, in that book, we see the Imperial Service just literally shooting people in the street for fun, and you get a hint of that in the
yeah.
book, as if that hasn't completely gone away.
Mm,
Um, and and it's supposed to feel chaotic and like, wait, what just happened? It's supposed to feel scary and nerve wracking. And the state empire of Yuqing exercises control in a lot of different ways, and the imperial service is a huge piece of that. I say this in the novel: if the Invincible Army is their right hand, is the state empire's right hand, then the imperial service is definitely its
yeah, absolutely.
left. So we get this antagonist, and Zhang specifically, one of the two imperial agents,
Mm,
is, especially by the end of the book, you realize that he's almost as unhinged as everyone else.
mm,
You get this point where Su Yong has kind of unmasked him as who he really is,
mm,
and we're really accelerating towards the climax at this point. And Takeshi is facing him at the end, and you get this realization from Takeshi that, oh, I could be this.
mm,
I I am this close to being this. I I, I could have been in his shoes. I could have been the same type of person
mm.
that he has become, and it's really a dark mirror to hold up to show Takeshi predominantly who he is now
Mm.
versus who he could have been,
And
who he could have become.
when you say there's this dark mirror, we see them at the well, we don't know that we see them at the start of the book until later, but we see them at the start, and we both see them, from that initial duel, sort of individually build this obsession, with, one with the other person, and one with, so because I'm not saying this very well, but I feel when you look at Zhang, you kind of see he comes away from this fight, and his obsession becomes Takeshi. It becomes kind of an outward obsession, where for Takeshi, he very much seems to be more obsessed with kind of how his own action in that fight, what his mistakes were, and it's very much an inward obsession. Do you think that's really the crux of what stopped Takeshi from becoming a Zang-like character, is the focus of that obsession? Or where's the point where you see Takeshi break from that dark mirror? Why isn't Takeshi Zang?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I think there's a lot of reasons why Takeshi isn't the same as Zhang
Mm,
that are both within the novel and without. Um, he is a outward facing warrior, whereas Zhang is a behind the scenes warrior.
mm,
They approach warfare differently, though you do get a little rundown of Zhang's history, and you realize in that he was an outward facing warrior. He was a part of the Invincible Army
mm,
for a little while until he was recruited or assigned into the Imperial service. The way you described that with Zhang's outward obsession with Takeshi versus Takeshi's inward obsession with his own actions, I think really is the difference in their senses of honor.
mm,
Takeshi is so concerned with everyone else's survival and so willing to give everything of himself. Like you mentioned earlier, he's got this interesting relationship with death and how he is trying to overcome it or not overcome it or accept it in his
mm,
own way. Whereas Zhang has an outright refusal with death and
mm,
failure in his eyes, whatever he views failure as. And Takeshi starts to go through that in the beginning with the word traitor repeating in his mind over and over and the obsession with that. But then very early on, you see the Kensai, the warrior mentor
mm,
of Takeshi, um, the sword saint, giving uh, these. Oh man, this is gonna sound really cliche, but giving the quote sensei talk,
mm,
the
yeah, yeah. Mm,
find your inner spirit, guide you, etc., etc. He's being nudged. Takeshi is being nudged by all the right people, by the Kensei, by Nakama, by even Mizu and Sparrow and Song and all of these characters that he interacts with. Honestly, even Hiro and Taka, that he is being nudged towards the light
mm,
by everyone he's with, and there's a lightheartedness to them and a love of life, even
mm,
though they are Japanese warriors. They have accepted death as a part of their duty, should it come to that. But they all chase, especially the livelihood between, or the liveliness
mm,
between Song and Hero and
mhm,
their interactions. That Takeshi starts to see this light in life and this light at the end of the tunnel, whereas Zhang, we come to find out, is so hyper focused on resolving this one duel,
mm,
and it has destroyed him, and
mm,
he has destroyed his career to do it, which isn't a huge focus of the book, so you don't get a huge window into that, but you do see it when Su Yong is basically reading him the riot act. Um, that all of those interactions really gave Takeshi a path to follow,
mm,
I'd say. Whereas Zhang, we don't know what happened to him after the duel in the beginning of the book, but Zhang didn't have that. He became
mm,
obsessed and focused and just to his own detriment and the death of dozens of soldiers along the way.
mm. I mean, do you think there's an element of pride in Zhang that Takeshi doesn't necessarily have as when you're looking at the duel at the beginning, sure, it's unresolved and there's no winner or loser, but from a thematic standpoint, Zhang shattering Takeshi's blade kind of, when you read that scene, there is very much a loss for Takeshi in that scene, and there's a kind of an element of pride in Zhang that sort of goes through the book. So it seems to me that the difference really is those relationships you're talking about, or at least those interactions uh, you were talking about, and then also, a great element of pride in how each of them chases death as well.
Absolutely agree. Uh, when Takeshi loses his blade for uh, samurai, especially the way I've portrayed it,
Mm,
your blade is a part of your soul. It is a part of who you are. Um, and Takeshi losing that is how he starts the book.
mm,
So he enters the book broken. That blade is absolutely an analogy, and the first half of the book is really him being slowly reforged
mm,
until he eventually receives a new blade and has this chance to forge his new path forward. And with Zhang, we don't see a lot of that because that happens behind the scenes for Zhang, and so
mm,
we don't know what choices he made along the way. How did he recover from that and resolve from that? And turns out we discover through his actions in the novel that he
mm,
just became obsessed. And Takeshi took his own failure as he processed it to, in the end, become better. He goes through mourning, he goes through grief, he goes through all five stages,
mm,
but Zhang we see is stuck on the first stage and he is just angry.
mm. It's interesting when you say, you've got these things that, very much are happening in the book and these things behind the scenes. Is there anything you'd want a reader to know, either while they're reading the book or after they've read the book, that isn't in the book?
Mm, about Zhang specifically, um,
Or any
in my
aspect of the
mind,
book?
as I
Mm,
well, for Zhang specifically, in my mind, as I was reading the whole thing,
mm-hmm,
uh, they're trying to figure out how he handles getting sent home. So he's on this island just off the coast of Japan, off the Korean peninsula,
mm,
uh, at a Yuching listening post. They're sending drones out towards Japan, trying to find ways to subvert or perhaps even invade. And he goes through this failure and returns home to Yutang, to the capital planet of Yuching, where his family is, his father is, in what he views as being a failure.
mm,
And while we don't explore any of that in the novel because it's left to be implied, because there's only so many words,
mm. Yeah, of course.
and and to be honest, I already had a lot of points of view and a lot of characters, so
Mm,
I didn't need to add another one. Zhang didn't need to be his own point of view.
mm,
Um, but he has literally burned his career to try to resolve this duel. He control, which is what they refer to their command structure as
mm.
within the ISS. Uh, control does not know that he is there.
Oh,
In
yeah,
the end of the
yeah.
novel,
Mm,
he and Su Yong, the other Imperial agent, have this come to Jesus moment where you realize that she's manipulating the shit out of him,
mm,
but he he has burned his career to the ground to get to Takeshi. He's become so obsessed that he co-opted armaments and soldiers and brand new gear, the new ISS models, the new armor, all of that is literally revealed in real time
mm,
in the novel. He has co-opted all of this, pulling strings from his father's influence and his own perceived prestige, and he's willingly thrown them all away just to try to defeat Takeshi.
mm.
And you really realize when he's willing to kill his own soldiers to do it that he is just absolutely
Yeah.
insane. And by the end of it, he is what the Sheikh could have been for
Mm,
Takeshi. Like that analogy, sticking to that analogy we were using earlier, he is what Takeshi could have become if he embraced that gut wrenching addiction to adrenaline and the failure
mm,
that he perceives he has become. And so that especially after reading the book, understanding that Zhang has literally thrown away his entire life, probably shamed his father, like absolutely sacrificed everything in the pursuit of this deranged obsession of
Mm.
his, uh, really makes him feel even more unhinged in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. Kind of looking towards the future now. You've sort of mentioned you're working on your next book in the
Mhm.
Infinity Universe. Is this going to be the same characters, or one or two kind of following along, or is it a whole new cast at the moment?
It will not be the same characters,
Hmm.
actually. And I can't say anything out loud, but I'm probably writing a new novel,
Mm.
and it's going to have some interesting characters in it. And
A new wave of novels potentially.
uh, one might say, still in very early stages, but very very excited.
No,
And
that's yeah, that's
with
really
with a
cool.
little bit of diligence and hard work on my part, hope to be having these exact same conversations again next year about the same time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think I've had a bit of a Q and A about with Gutierre about sort of the thematic core that lies at the sort of heart of this will be coming out after all the embargo dates of
Yeah, me too. But
yeah
yes,
of next wave like the thematic I think the themes that Gutierre as that kind of designer narrative designer at CB wanted to explore with New Wave are incredibly interesting and I think yeah just begging for a novel. So I think whether that's a mandate given to you or whether that's a choice you made, I think that's genuinely really exciting.
I walked into a conversation with Max, the
Mm.
marketing director, and said, I've got all these different ideas, man. Out of all of these, what do you think would be best?
Hmm.
And he definitely stopped on one of them and said, this is what I think would be best. And I said, okay, let's do it. Let's roll.
Yeah, no,
So
that's
here
very
we are.
cool. And kind
Thanks,
of
man.
outside of the Infinity Universe, is there anything else going on for you that you'd like to shout out?
Um, well, right now my whole life is consumed by moving, so I don't even know which way is up. Um, when we're done, I'm going to break down my computer and pack it up and get it over to the new place. I have been approached by a new game, and I may be writing a whole new
Very
world and
cool.
lore for them. We'll see.
That's really
Certainly
cool.
hopeful,
Mm.
excited about the possibilities. Uh, Also in talks with Max about a kind of community focused uh, article series.
Oh
So
wow, that's really interesting.
we'll see.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't want to put too many chickens or eggs before the chick. Whatever way that analogy
Yeah,
works. I
chicken or
don't
the
want to put
egg.
the
Yeah.
chickens across the road yet. But man, Infinity, I like to say, changed my life.
Mm.
It changed my career path. It changed um, my day to day habits and hobbies, and I when I found the game and it was shared with me by my buddy Chris, it really did become something that I'm quite obsessed with,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
has created these beautiful opportunities to tell more stories, and I'm really really excited to be a part of it.
No, that's fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time to come on, and thank you everyone at
Thanks for
home
having me.
for watching as well. No, that's quite all right. So the link to the ebook's going to be down in the description, along with a few other very cool links to check out from Gabriel. So thank you again all for watching. Thanks again to Gabriel. And hey, if anything in this conversation piqued you, that song, it's a fantastic book, a lot of really interesting and great themes. I hope you've been able to parse from our conversation. It's a very, very intricately woven narrative as well. So it's very much worth giving a shot, whether you like books or just like Infinity. But hey, look, until the next one, goodbye, everybody.
Yeah. Peace.